What's up, guys? Interesting. I made that video yesterday on my case of you know why you guys need to buy Bitcoin and stuff like that. And Anthony Pompliano, very famous investor in Bitcoin, Bitcoin enthusiast, loves it, and he's an investor in other things. Very successful guy. And then he had Michael Shellenberger on his channel, and he's a famous author. I think he used to be a Democrat, but now he's an independent. Here's his bio right here. Very smart guy. Two very intelligent, smart, wealthy, successful guys talking about Bitcoin. And I guess he's against it, and I'm because I know Anthony Pompliano's for it, and I haven't watched a minute of this, so I want to break this down. It is a 46-minute video. The debate, so I'll probably break it into 3 parts. So let's dive in. I'll be cutting in, give you my thoughts on it. So let's dive on in here and let's see what's going on with this debate.
Bitcoin is introducing a kind of political agenda and passing it off as a digital revolution. It's not what it is.
Bitcoin is the only asset that is not subject to other organizations, governments, or other individuals who can then come in and unilaterally confiscate it.
If we go to war with China, they don't care where you're going to move to in the world. They're going to grab your ass and make you fight for America. That's going to include grabbing all your Bitcoin. There's this idea that like, oh God, the Cyprus government, they took their people's money, and what right do they have? Well, the right they have is that they're the government. Crypto ultimately should be zero.
You think that anti-censorship, anti-censorship, private property rights, and expression in the digital realm of free speech, those have zero value?
Well,
all right. I like the little preview. Looks like it's going to be good. Obviously you could tell who's on what side. What's his name? Peter Schiff. He's a famous Bitcoin hater.
Bitcoin doesn't have any value in and of itself. It's not backed up by anything that has any value. People buy these digital tokens because they think somebody else will pay a higher price than they did. Now, the people who got in early and who are selling now, well, they made a lot of money. But the people who are buying now or who are not selling, they're going to lose a lot of money. That's how these pyramids work, and that's what this is.
He doesn't like Bitcoin, but this guy's a pretty smart dude. He's smart because he used to be in the Democratic Party. Now he's not. So that's pretty smart. I got to give him credit for that. And I think he believes in climate change, but he feels like it can be different by different usages, like nuclear power. And they're saying it's basically not. He's saying it's not. Climate change is not as bad as people are saying. I don't believe in that at all, anyways. But this is going to be interesting. Let's see what happens.
All right, guys, super excited. I've got Michael Shellenberger here with me. Michael, you tweeted out and said, hey, I want to come on and talk about Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies with people within the industry. And I thought a great place to start would maybe just be like, what is your current understanding, maybe positive or negative, about Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies?
Yeah. Well, first, thank you for having me on. I am someone that cares a lot about public policy, and that means I care about having good conversations and discourse, and also being able to talk with people that I might disagree with, which is what I think the case is here. I want to depersonalize it because I suspect that you're a Bitcoin investor.
Correct.
Do I have that right?
Of course.
And so like, I want to depersonalize it and just take it at kind of a public policy perspective.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's worth asking whether I'm a Bitcoin investor or a cryptocurrency investor. I'm not. Although my son and wife bought a little bit of Bitcoin, so but it's such small quantities that are sort of trivial to even mention. But yeah, I mean, my view is probably pretty close to Elizabeth Warren.
Your view is as close to Elizabeth Warren. I hope you're just talking about Bitcoin, man. Oh my God, that woman. Oh man, Elizabeth Warren. You started off wrong with me there, but let's be fair. Let's see what he says.
I am viewed as, people on the far left think I'm pretty conservative at this point. I think of myself as a moderate on a lot of different issues, actually. But on crypto, I don't think that there's a purpose to it. At this point, I don't see any reason it should be regulated because I don't think it's like a real thing. I think it's basically a pyramid scheme built on top of a criminal, digital enterprise built on top of a kind of beautiful digital art project.
Wow. Okay, that was very well said. I like that summary of it, because I believe a lot of you and a lot of people that don't believe in Bitcoin or don't know what it is, the way he summarized that, and that was a really beautiful way of saying that. I think that was great how he said that, and I'm glad they're having a discussion, because it's okay to talk to people that you disagree with. So I like that. Let's see what else happens.
Mm-hmm. So let's unpack a little bit of this, right? Because I think it's very.
That's my core view.
Okay, that great starting point. One of the ways that I always kind of start these conversations is like, forget Bitcoin, blockchains, crypto, kind of the whole 9 yards. And if we just think of like the legacy financial system, my guess is that we probably have some common understanding and common thoughts. I actually think even the Elizabeth Warren and kind of her perspective, a lot of people arrive at maybe three core beliefs. The first is that the average American citizen is worse off financially today than they were in the past from a purchasing power standpoint. So inflation's been eating away at people's purchasing power. Why? Up for debate, but definitely they have less and less purchasing power kind of over time. There's proponents of minimal inflation that would argue, hey, we need kind of 2% inflation because it is able to stimulate economic activity. It's able to stimulate velocity of money. And so a little bit isn't that bad. But I think that's kind of one core belief that a lot of people both inside and outside of the Bitcoin community have, which is this like loss of purchasing power. And I'll come back to that in a second. The second thing is, I think that there are a lot of folks who look at the legacy financial system and they say various players, whether they are oversight organizations, whether they are the major banks, whether they are individual market participants, they are doing things that run counter to kind of the benefits of the whole. The opportunity isn't evenly distributed and people aren't able to actually kind of have a fair shot, if you will, in that financial system. And I think, Elizabeth Warren's probably been one of the biggest proponents of critiquing Wall Street and the various banks and things like that. And then the third thing that I would say is I think most people would raise their hand and say, yes, I believe in the U.S. Constitution, right? And kind of all of the things that that encompasses, from freedom of speech, private property rights, and those things that tend to be, I'll say non-controversial, but I'll caveat it with like, I'm sure someone somewhere has a problem with the U.S. Constitution, but it doesn't sound like you. And so would you agree that like those three things are probably common ground when it comes to, before we get into the Bitcoin conversation?
Okay, Anthony, I like that. I think we all, as freedom fighters, constitutionalists, conservative, fiscally people, liberal as far as like, societal things that we agree with, don't piss on my lawn or whatever, liberals like that, not the liberals, the Democrats, but I believe that we all think that way, I agree with all three of those points. We're definitely we all love the Constitution. So, so far, so good. Good points, Anthony.
Yes.
Okay. So the reason why I start there is I look at Bitcoin very differently, right? Than most people, or maybe publicly it appears, where there is a very large portion of the Bitcoin community that looks at it as a speculation tool. Right? Kind of to your point is people are saying, hey, if I buy this and I close my eyes and I wait for a period of time, the price is going to go up and I'm here to get rich. Right. And
right.
We could
my wife and son.
Okay. and look, if I'm really honest, I think that to some degree, like that speculation component is true in all financial assets. Right. There's even people who buy their home and they're like, look, I need a place to live, but also I'm buying this one because I think it's going to go up in value. Right. So there's
You're
definitely
talking to me right there.
Okay.
Yeah,
So 100%,
sure.
there's a bunch of people who I think are buying Bitcoin and don't even understand really what it is. They just think they can get rich quick. Right.
Well, yeah, or more generously, you just think it's a valuable asset. I mean, if I'm being nicer to, I've teased them because, of course, they lost money.
I'm glad he brought that up. A lot of my friends and family make fun of me too about quote unquote losing money in Bitcoin. That's a good point. Guys, just like in a stock or silver or anything that you buy, you only lose money if you sell or try to realize that gain or whatever, right? So if I bought Bitcoin at 69,000, let's say every single Satoshi, every single Bitcoin that I have, I bought it at 69,000 and now it's down to 17,000. The more uneducated people that don't know about the markets and stuff like that, they will say that I lost money. Well, I didn't lose anything because I'm holding on to it. Just like we're holding on to our silver, our gold, our platinum, our long-term investments of stocks or whatever it is, we hold on to all that stuff. So you only really lose something if you try to sell it. We all know that. So I'm glad he brought that up.
But it's more like, some people view it as a get rich quick thing. Some people may view it as like a long-term asset to hold like gold, which I suspect is your view. But there's other people like me who just think it's a digital art project with an easy way to money launder built on top of it, with a pyramid scheme built on top of that. So I think that, I appreciate starting with some core values, which I totally share with you. I'm sure you and I share a lot of core values. I think there's an ideological agenda here too, which is basically anti-statist. And I know this because someone who I have a lot of respect for, Balaji, am I saying the last name right? Srinivasan.
Correct.
And as soon as we met, we started arguing about cryptocurrencies.
Balaji wasted no time. He just gets right into the debate.
I mean, I'm not a PhD in libertarianism, but I feel like I have a pretty solid bachelor's in it, and know some of the ways in which it's different from classical liberalism and from libertarianism. But I mean, from like Randianism. But I think that there's a kind of I think there's a sort of, it's not a values difference, because I think we all value public safety and freedom and democracy. There's still a kind of, I think there's a libertarian fantasy that is tied up with seasteading, that's tied up with a kind of idea of getting away from the nation state, that I think is absurd, because I think it doesn't deal with Hobbes. It doesn't deal with just the reality of the human animal and the ways in which that it's just the strong preying on the weak, unless there is a centralized state to protect the vulnerable. So, I think there's that going on, but I ultimately just kind of go, I don't think it's a very important, I don't mean to be mean about it, but I don't think it's also even very particularly important, except for the fact that you get the pyramid schemes and the crime. And on the crime stuff, I kind of go, well, part of me agrees with the classic crypto point, which is just that people use cash, they use fiat currency, to borrow your language, to commit crimes. That's true. I do think digital makes it easier to money launder. And then there's the pyramid schemes. So in some ways I go, the real question for public policy is just whether it should be regulated. And now, having spent some amount of time looking at it, and I wrote 2 pieces, both of which I think are very accurate and got at the issue around SBF and FTX. You sort of saw somebody who was very close to getting regulations that would have helped him.
Yeah.
And so I am skeptical of regulating it, in part because I don't think that what is called cryptocurrency is a currency. I think there's only national currencies, or what you would call fiat currencies. I think everything else is sort of seasteading libertarian bullshit with kind of mafia criminal money laundering built on top of it, and pyramid schemes built on top of that. And the only real public policy issue is just to warn people, that this is going on. There's not much. Otherwise, I think you're just, I don't think there's like a regulatory agenda. I just mostly kind of think it has to be kind of denounced. So I think that's where I kind of come out.
Wow. Okay, that was a lot. He said a lot. That guy's smart. You can tell he's very educated and smart. And I again, I love hearing people that are very, very educated and wealthy and successful in their lives, and they talk about Bitcoin, you know, as a negative, right? Because it brings up a great discussion of the reasons a lot of us, you know, who didn't get into it at first, didn't do it, and many of you that haven't gotten into it haven't gotten into it. And I love that. Now let me clear up something real quick. I'm not into cryptocurrencies. I'm into Bitcoin. And I know that's kind of like an oxymoron. That's like saying I'm not into precious metals, but I'm into silver. Cryptocurrency is a completely different animal to me. Bitcoin's its own entity, even though I know it's the first cryptocurrency and it's labeled a cryptocurrency. I completely agree with him what he said about all that stuff he said about cryptocurrencies. I feel the same way about 99% of them. We call those the shit coins in the Bitcoin world. As far as the FTX and the Sam bankrupt fried stuff goes, I completely agree with him. He deserved to be put under the jail. He's a complete criminal. And I love the fact that that happened to him because it crashed down the crypto market, and it also crashed down the Bitcoin market. FTX has nothing to do with Bitcoin. Bitcoin's its own entity. Nobody owns Bitcoin. So when FTX does that, it's an exchange. It's an exchange for other cryptos. It's almost like saying money's no good now because your bank was bad, right? An exchange is nothing but like a bank for money, for cryptos, right? So FTX doing what they did had nothing to do with Bitcoin, except for the people that didn't understand how Bitcoin really works. They got scared because they're not educated on it, and they just flooded it out of the market, and that's why Bitcoin is still down today, which is great for me because it's almost the equivalent of somebody selling a bunch of silver or something, and then the silver market going down, and we just go in there and buy it because we know better, because we're educated. It's the same thing. So I'm glad he's bringing up these points. I'm sure a lot of you guys think the same way, and I love it, man. So far, so good.
Okay, so let's kind of dig a little deeper on this. The reason why I start with kind of the common ground on those three beliefs is that my personal belief, and I can't speak to anybody else, but my personal belief is that Bitcoin specifically, if you take Bitcoin away from all of the other cryptocurrencies, which I would actually agree with you, many of them are not currencies, they are Ponzi schemes and all kinds of crazy nonsense, whatever, right? We're talking about something that is, by almost every single person who looks at it, Bitcoin is decentralized, right? Meaning that there is no one person that controls it. There is no one person who can make unilateral changes. It's very different than kind of these centralized either currencies or organizations. Bitcoin actually embodies and codifies the American ideals better than any technology in the world. And I'll give you kind of two examples. The first is when I talked about free speech and the ability to kind of have the protection of the U.S. Constitution. In the financial system today, you do not have free speech, right? There are many court cases that prove that software is free speech and all this stuff. And again, there is reasons why people will argue you shouldn't have the free speech. You shouldn't be able to do what you want with your money, whatever. But I think that Bitcoin ultimately says, although you may be sympathetic to a government or not, anyone in the world is able to send economic value to anyone else without asking permission of a third party. Now, in the United States, actually, I would argue we've been pretty damn good about protecting people's free speech and allowing them to conduct economic transactions as long as we didn't deem them to be financing terrorists or money laundering or kind of breaking the rules, right? For the most part, you or I can go to the ATM, we can get money out, we can go and buy stuff, we can swipe our credit card, we can send money to people around the world, and like we kind of go about our day. Other people around the world, in fact, hundreds of millions, if not billions of people can't do that. And sometimes that's because their governments are kind of oppressive. Sometimes that's because there are companies that are doing things that, either take value from them, stop them, whatever. Or it could actually be because their currency is inflating so quickly. If you look at somewhere like a Turkey, a Zimbabwe, a Venezuela, whatever, where literally the prices are changing in the store on an hour-to-hour basis, right? And so it just makes it nearly impossible to be able to express your economic view if literally the prices change on a day-to-day basis. So I think that's like one piece of this Bitcoin story is the ability to take the ideal of free speech and codify it in a piece of technology and then hand it to anyone in the world with an internet connection, right? The accessibility of this is a kind of a key component. The second thing is this idea of private property rights. So if I was to ask you, what property do you own? you would tell me a list of all the assets that you kind of have on what would be the equivalent of your like personal balance sheet. You say, hey, I've maybe have a house, I've got some stocks, I've got some cash, I've got, whatever other kind of assets you own. But if you actually go and you break that down, the odds of you being able to defend your personal property is very, very low. For example, if a bank was to say to you, we're not going to give you your dollars back, you, yes, do have a legal path. You can go to court, you can go and try to fight it and do all this stuff. But what we've seen is in many countries around the world, Cyprus back in the 2012, 2013 timeframe is kind of the quintessential example that Bitcoiners point to. They basically just said, look, we're just going to tax this because we need it. And they were able to take that currency, that hard-earned economic value from citizens without any kind of real rhyme or reason or legal precedent. And so if you then were to go and say, well, let me look at my house, for example, there are people who lose their homes every single day. And sometimes that is because of actions of their own. Sometimes that is actions of other organizations. And sometimes there's things like eminent domain, where literally pieces of their personal property are then confiscated by the government. And I don't think that this is so much a anti-government view, which again, there are definitely people in every community, right? There's literally people on both sides of the aisle who think the government is bad or whatever. But I do think that this is very much an individual rights story. And if there's one thing that we've seen over time in this digital era, it's that individual rights are being decreased rather than increased. And sometimes there is a strong argument for why that's happening, kind of the greater good and kind of all of those different points. But when it comes to your ability to have freedom of speech and express your views without being inhibited by governments, organizations, or other individuals, and then also the ability to own and defend your own personal property, I would argue that in the digital realm, Bitcoin is the only asset where you actually have ownership of an asset that is not subject to other organizations, governments, or other individuals who can then come in and unilaterally confiscate it without your kind of agreement.
Good points. I agree with them on everything you just said. I'm liking this conversation. This is part one of it. I'm going to break this up to probably 3 parts. So stay tuned for part 2. But I definitely like the part about the banks and stuff like that, and how he was saying that, you own your money. And if you put it in the bank, you may be able to go, if something happened with the bank, you may have to go to court for it, whatever. But that's why I don't keep a whole lot of cash in the bank. But there are definitely countries around this world that your money's not safe. And also the prices are going up and down for goods and services and stuff like that. So we're not talking about Bitcoin and precious metals and things like that just in America. We're talking about these are global assets. So I'm really liking this conversation. So I can't wait to see what happens in part 2.